Hello subscribers and watchers, what's up? This is Vivs from slidenerd here. In this video, we are going to talk about what are constructors in Java. Now if you guys have heard this word before, you know very well that constructors are a special type of method. In this video, we are going to talk about constructors, their different types, how you can use them in your programs and so on. So let's get started. First thing we're going to discuss is what is the constructor. So when you create an object of a class using the new operator, it is that time and only that time when you call a special method called the constructor. Now this constructor's only work is to give some values to other instance variables that are inside the class. Now if you guys are not sure what instance variables are, please check the previous video out where we have talked about the different types of variables in Java. So constructor is a special method that is called when you use the new operator. For example, here while creating an object of some class called person, what I say is person P is new person. Now this expression here on the right hand side, if you guys notice, there's person word which is same as the class name, but there is a parenthesis indicating that this is like a method, and this is what is known as a constructor in Java. So if you don't define a constructor inside your class, then Java is gonna create a default constructor that will assign default values for all your variables. Again, things have been discussed so far at a very high level. Let's take some examples and see what each of these statements actually mean. So what does the default constructor do? Let's have a class person. There is an instance variable string name, string address, int age. Now if you guys remember, a person has three major properties. You can say many properties, out of which we have considered three major ones: the name, the age, and the address. So to create an object of this class, what I would say is person me is new person. Now what happens? Constructors create objects and give their instance variables default values, which means this name variable over here, age, and address variable over here, they need to be given some default values before your object can actually work. So here, let's take a look at this. Here your me object over here points to the person object that was just created with this statement person me is new person, where me is on the left hand side, new person is this object here on the right hand side, and the default values: name is null, age is 0, address is null, have been given. Now if you guys remember the rules for default values in Java, all object types have a default value of null, which means string or any other object that you make here will have a default value of null. All numbers have a default value of 0, that is age is 0. If there was a double, it would be 0.0, and booleans have a default value of false. So those are the three things that you guys need to remember as far as default values is considered. So let's talk about the constructor in a little more detail, try to understand. Now in the earlier statement right here, we saw that the constructor is giving default values. What if I want to give something else as the default value? What if I want the age to be 10 as default and the name equals to Vivs as default? How do I do that? In that case, what I do is define my constructor. Inside the class person, I simply write my constructor. Now notice very carefully, this looks just like a method. It has a name which is the same as the class name. There is a parenthesis, there is an opening brace, closing brace, but no return type, nothing like void or int or anything. And you cannot have return statements inside this special type of method that we have just made. So inside this I simply say name is Vivs, age is 1, address is null. So I can give whatever values I want inside this default constructor, which is my version of the default constructor. Remember, even if you don't define this default constructor here, Java is still gonna create a default constructor for that class, and that will give default values. But here, by making my own default constructor, what I get is the ability to decide what values I can give to these variables as default values. So now let's take a look at this. I say person me is new person. Let's see what happens. This time you have me over here on the left hand side, which is this reference. This me is pointing to an object of type person, and the default values have been initialized, which means this statement here runs. Name becomes Vivs, age becomes 1, address becomes null, and that is exactly how a constructor works. So every object has to be constructed before you attempt to use it, and remember that for sure. So now let's talk about the memory details of exactly what happened when a constructor is being used. So here I say person B is new person. The right hand side of the statement is the part where the constructor gets called and all the statements within the constructor start running, right? So when I say that, let's see what happens. There is a memory location, there is some number 5585, and me is actually containing this value 5585. In other words, me is this reference here. And what is this 5585? Let's take a look. This 5585 is the address where you can find the other details of the class, like the name, the age, and the city that you see over here. So in other words, the reference variable never contains the object directly. What it contains is some number here that points to the data which is gonna start at that position in the memory address. Now if you guys want, I can prove this to you guys in NetBeans or Eclipse, but we'll be working out with examples in the upcoming videos, so don't worry about it. So now let's talk about a parameterized constructor. Let's take a scenario where I've said person me is new person, and I have put vivs 120 and xyz within the parentheses, just like I would do with a method. So since a constructor is just like a method, is it possible to have parameterized constructors? That's the question that you have. Let's take a look. Here I have my parameterized constructor person that takes three arguments: string n, which is this vivs over here, int a, which is this 120 over here, and string address, which is this xyz over here. And inside this constructor, what I'm trying to do is I'm saying name equals to n, age equals to a, address equals to addr, and those statements are gonna put these three values inside these three instance variables. So this is how I can assign values to instance variables out here using a parameterized constructor by first defining it. Now remember, Java does not provide a parameterized constructor by default, which means if you want one like this, then you'll have to custom make it. So now let's talk about some points about the constructor. Let's again revise what we discussed. When you create an object, the constructor is called before any method. When you don't define a constructor, Java provides its own default constructor that's gonna give default values to all the instance variables. But when you do define your own constructor, then you get to decide what values should be given to the instance variables. Constructors don't return values, not even void, and of course they don't have return statements inside. And if you define your constructor, then Java does not provide a default constructor. Now this is one major point out here that you guys need to remember. And most of all, the constructor name must be the same as the class name, otherwise it becomes like a normal method, which is not the case, right? And there is one most important point that you need to remember is this: if you define a constructor which is parameterized constructor, and if you don't define a default constructor, then Java is not gonna generate any default constructors for you, which is very similar to what I've already said here by saying if you define your constructors, Java does not provide a default constructor. So let's work this out with a simple example. Try to understand how the different types of constructors work and see what happens when they are executed. In the mean, if you guys like what you saw, please like this video, share this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comment boxes below. I'll catch you guys in the next video where we'll work this example out. In the meantime, have a nice day. Thanks for watching.